right, welcome to Modern Musicology with Rob and Alan. How's it going, Rob?
It's great. How are you?
Wonderful. So last week it was Anthony and I because you were gallivanting around Chicago for your birthday. How was your birthday?
Birthday was great. We took the train,
Yeah.
which was lovely, but I probably could have tried to do this, but Wi-Fi on a moving train is just really it's worse
Mm.
than mummy. It's worse than mummies. Um, sorry. And yeah, it was nice. It's really weird to go to a town like Chicago where like the amount of shows and like
Oh
live
yeah.
theater and stuff is like, where is it? It's a lot of local bands like in all small cities.
Yeah.
Support your local artists and your
Right on.
local venues, but it's nowhere near like it was. So that part of it was weird. But yeah, it was
Right.
nice.
Excellent. I'm so glad. Well, it's good to have you back this week. And sadly, Anthony isn't with us because he is suffering a migraine tonight, which
Ugh.
sucks. So let's get on with a couple of news items. A really bizarre story came out this week. It's with a Reagan connection. Tell us about it.
So I sent this to you guys kind of just as a, hey, this is weird type
No,
of
it's
thing.
it's so freaking weird.
So, as people may or may not know, John Hinckley's been released, the man who shot James Brady and President Reagan in, was it 1984? I don't
80.
remember.
80, I
80.
believe. 80
It
or
was 80.
81.
Yeah, I don't
It
remember
was,
the year. I
yeah.
remember when it happened. I just try to forget all that. But so he's been released. He's out on parole, and apparently, when he was, incarcerated, one of the things that he liked to do is, use music, and he was, apparently he went through a lot of the therapy and stuff that people like that go through in prison. Not that you and I hopefully aren't experts on.
I hope not.
But so he got released, right? And we're not going to argue the merits of that here nor there, but
Nope.
he announced that now that he's released, he has been working while he has been incarcerated on a country and western album.
Yes.
So he has released a video of him doing a country song with the full-on intention of, basically he's just want to be a guy who wants to live by himself, be left alone, and make country record albums.
Exactly. And why not? And I mean, okay. So many of the great country albums are all about incarceration and, murders and all this kind of shit. So, I mean, he's the perfect subject matter for it, I suppose.
But he's doing it backwards.
Yes, exactly.
So
yeah.
I just, I saw that and I'm like, this is so friggin' weird.
Absolutely.
And I sent it to you and Anthony just because, well, Anthony likes to hear weird stuff Americans do anyway. And I just thought, like, this is so bizarre.
Right.
This can't be a thing. And then sure enough, it's becoming a thing. I don't know if he's going to get played on the radio or anything, but I mean, if you're a DJ, right? And I mean, I play songs on the radio, but how do I get handed a record of like, hey, this is the guy who shot Reagan. I'm going to play it on the radio, right?
Well, it's not only that, but, country audiences tend to be overwhelmingly Republican. So how are you going to play the guy who shot one of the most popular Republican presidents in the history of modern America?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard sell. So interesting.
And we'll keep an eye on this, kind of keep an eye on it. And I don't know what streaming platforms. I haven't wanted to give it the attention to look.
Exactly.
The cursory look, but just if you are, in your favorite country western bar or your local Bass Pro, and you hear a song by John Hinckley, probably not Junior. They probably won't use the Junior, right? It's not the greatest American hero. It's not Ralph Hinckley. It's that guy that you think it is. So, yeah, it's kind of odd and strange. So, I with Halloween being around too, I just thought something weird might be interesting.
Right. So also last night, I don't know if you caught Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty good run of shows this season so far. This was episode 4. Jason Sudeikis hosted, and we had a pretty strong musical guest. I mean, this has been a good season for musical guests so far.
Mm-hmm.
But Brandi Carlyle performed last night. She played 2 songs from her new album, and she was flipping dynamite. I mean, they are a solid band. She's a great songwriter, an incredible singer. And it's just, you know, a group of 5 or 6 people who just get on stage with instruments and play a song. And that's the kind of thing that you don't hear a lot of in television anymore.
Yeah, the thing I liked about it is, I understand when you're on SNL that you want to make an impression, right? And and I remember seeing Klaus Nomi on TV and going, "What is this?" Right? But also, like,
Yeah.
I was hooked, right?
Absolutely.
And I remember seeing Nirvana going, "Okay, this is great." I knew who they were when they went out, right? But
Yeah.
like, I remember Sia a couple of years ago. I'm just like, it's the last time I'm like, "What is this? This is odd," right? And you have a lot of musical guests on SNL that tend to go for being showy or weird, or they play up the visual performance of
Yep.
it more than the
Yep.
music.
Yep.
And it was really good. It was almost like Austin City Limits took over SNL.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
It's
Good
just great.
analogy.
It's great to see a singer-songwriter
Yeah.
on the show. It's great to see a female singer-songwriter, right? And her records are amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
and they do a lot of pop, they do a lot of hip hop, and it's just they're really trying. I like what I've liked so far. I mean, you touched on this a little bit. Um, I really like the fact they've diversified the musical offerings this season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she's not, she's not a pop artist, right?
Right.
They threw out the 17 to 21 demographic with her, right? And my guess is because Sudeikis was on, they figured that this would kind of,
Yep.
kind of work that. But man, she hit a home run. She was just phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely. And in the second song, the first song was Broken Horses, which is
Mhm.
the first single from her new album, and it's just a phenomenal rocker. It's so good. The second song she did was a much slower, more piano-based kind of ballady thing, but man, what a voice! And the way she just like addressed the camera, like a side glance or something to the camera was just incredible.
And the thing too that I thought was really great is a lot of people don't do this on SNL. The placement of where the songs are. She
Yeah.
knew that with the first song, go out, bang strong.
Right,
Second
right.
half, slow it down, right?
Yeah,
Because if you only see one of the
right,
musical performances, go for
right.
that one, right?
And it drives me nuts when artists do it backwards, either because the ballady thing is the new single that they're promoting or whatever, but it doesn't make a good moment for the first half of the show, you know?
No,
So anyway, I just thought she was
no,
fantastic, and I really wanted to bring that up a little bit.
and the whole season's just been really strong.
Yeah, it has been.
And one of the things that I love about SNL that why I still love it, although probably not as much as you. Every time there's a new cast member, Alan gets a tattoo of their name on his leg. Secret fact. But anyway, one of the things I love about SNL is that I use it kind of as my gateway to hearing artists I may not have heard or I've
Yeah,
heard about but haven't heard their music.
yeah,
And I want, Brandi Carlyle should be that for other people. Like if you haven't, go YouTube this, right? When
hmm,
you're done watching this, go YouTube this. Or
yeah,
just take
yeah,
5 minutes to listen to her records.
yeah.
Because even if you don't like the music, the voice is incredible.
Yeah. Well, I saw her a couple of years ago. Heart did a big tour where they had all like
Oh yeah.
women fronted supporting artists. And the show that we saw, I forget who it was that was originally scheduled, but I guess whoever it was had to drop out, and Brandi Carlyle came in for 2 dates, Atlanta and one other one. And I knew very little about Brandi Carlyle at the time, and she flippin' blew me away. I mean, she was a powerhouse and really funny and just really down to earth. And she was so cool. And Amy Ray of the Indigo Girls came in and sat like 2 rows ahead of us because she and Brandy are buddies. And I was like, oh my God, it's Amy Ray. So it was quite a night.
Mhm.
We got one other news item that came out this week that I want to talk about super quick, but we're going to have to spend an entire show on this topic. And that's the royalties issue with streaming platforms. So
Yeah,
tell us a
so
little bit.
there's been a couple articles around that, Spotify and some of the streaming services have sort of readjusted their royalty systems for artists, right? And it is just this treads an interesting turf for people that love music because we
Mm,
love the instantaneousness of digital music. We
yeah.
love the flexibility of storing digital music, right?
Yep.
But at our nature, before that, we love to support artists. We love to go to shows. We love to go to record stores. We like to support artists that are coming up. And it's really hard to do that when you know that, like, I'm going to play their record on Spotify and listen to it, see if I like it. But then they're only going to get like a third of a penny for me doing that. So,
Right.
the amount of money, I mean, people have known for a while that, it's always been, you always hear these stories about, Bing Crosby never made as much off of White Christmas as you think he did. Or, Elvis never made as much off of Love Me Tender as you thought. You always hear stories like this, right?
Yeah.
And you hear, like, I remember Victoria Price talking about the check that Vincent used to get for Thriller every year. It was like so small compared to how often Thriller gets played, right?
Right.
You would think, when you hear, oh my God, Vincent Price was on Thriller, he must have gotten like, thousands of dollars or hundreds. No, it's a check for like maybe under 5 or 10, right?
Yeah.
And this has been long overdue for artists getting paid, and a lot of it's their record contracts. It ties in a lot with royalties. It ties in a lot with publishing, things like, there's a lot of extraneous stuff at work here. But the bottom line is, if you go to a show and you see a band, before you think about buying a t-shirt, buy a record or buy something, because you're supporting your bands, support your local bands. Even if you buy a button, I make it a point, if I go see a band for free, I make it a point to check out their merch table and buy something, right?
Yeah.
But it's just, and the industry's never really opened their books to how much they pay for royalties, but this is kind of a glimpse, right?
Right.
And SoundCloud and Spotify and these different things, for streaming, you pay, for what you pay, $10, $30, $50, whatever, for their services, right? For what all the money they're making in and all of the access that they have to catalogs, the artists need to get paid more. That is the bottom line of this.
Right. And I'm sure their side of the argument is that, they have the potential of millions of streams per day. So even if they make a fraction of a penny, that's still a pretty big payout. But I just don't think that quite adds up in the traditional, format of, you get paid for what plays. I mean, I just think it's, and so, Anthony and I talked about this a little bit last week. Even though we both are streaming subscribers, we still buy physical media if it's a band that we care about, a band that we have collected over the years, a new band that we are really digging, because you can't rely strictly on the streaming as artist support.
And I'm still old. I like the physical artwork, liner notes, things like that. And I think that, like, it's like when you see a film, if someone took the time to mix the sound, I should take the time to read their name as, oh, this guy mixed the sound.
Exactly.
Right. But the big thing is, like, unlike you, who are a working musician, the only thing I can compare it to is if, like, I'm DJing at night at a club or at a bar or something, right? And I play a record, and at the end of the night, I don't get paid. Or if you got a gig and you play your guts out for 4 hours and you don't get paid, it's that same type of thing. Or you do a gig for $600. I'm sorry, 6,000, because you're high end. And they give you $6, right?
Right.
So imagine if you were like the Rolling Stones and you're playing a gig and the tickets are like $325 a ticket, right? And but this is streaming. You will get maybe 18 cents off of each ticket or something, right? It's not, it's not a new thing. People are waking up like, oh my God, this is terrible. It's like, I remember, when I worked at a major label in the 2000s, and when I worked at Elektra, the artists would always want to know, how much are we getting? Where's our music going? What's it getting used for? And there is a flip side of this, that if you're an up and coming artist and you get your stuff on SoundCloud or you get your stuff on Spotify, the exposure for that's amazing, right? Or you get it on YouTube.
Potentially, yeah.
But if you don't have a mechanism, if you're an indie band and you don't have the mechanism to have a label push you, right? Yep. Or if you're not Wet Leg, who are dubbed like the next big thing, and you got a big boost of press behind you, it's hard. And
absolutely.
And even if you do break, right, the amount of time and energy you spend, and I believe in, like, the capitalism of music. I mean, if you sell records, you should get paid, and if you don't sell records, you have to work a little harder to get the exposure and the marketing out. I
Hmm.
get it, right?
Hmm.
But this is like grossly underpaying people for their
Right.
talent, for their art.
Yeah. Right. All right. I definitely want to spend more time on this topic, and we'll
And
have to do a
we'll have to get like an artist on who actually has to deal.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But let's jump into our first big topic of the night, and that is next weekend's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I am so excited about seeing this show. It's a really, really interesting and really diverse,
Hmm.
induction of artists. And before we get too far, well, two things. Before we get too far into this, um, people who are watching, if you have questions or comments or thoughts about next week's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, drop them in the comments, and we will get to them as quickly as we can. Um, and second of all, I'm sure this is the case for you, Rob. I am not one of those people that gets bitchy about rap and R&B and soul artists being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, don't at me about that shit. I am perfectly fine with Jay-Z being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
They're kind of using the word rock and roll broad as a broad palette
As
for
a
music.
broad brush, exactly. It's
They can't.
popular
I mean,
music,
do you call it
basically.
do you call it the Popular Music Hall of Fame?
Right.
But if you call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, then everyone's like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
It's kids music, right, or whatever. It's hooligan rock.
Hooligans.
If you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you probably bothered somebody's parents. Um,
True.
yeah. So yeah, I don't mind them calling it that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
when they thought of it, they're like, we'll call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And
Mhm.
if they had a chance to change it now to something broader, they would. But I don't think Jay-Z's really upset that he's not going to go in. He's going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, interestingly, there is a rap, or basically a hip hop museum, and their version of a Hall of Fame that's being built up in the New York area. And they did a groundbreaking on it this past week, and Jay-Z was, I mean, I'm sorry, LL Cool J was there, and he did one of the speeches of that day, and the first thing he said was, "I am really, really excited about being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but hip hop is where my heart is."
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely appropriate. You can do both things. You can be both of those things.
Yeah, because we have a Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville that's
Yeah,
amazing, right?
right.
Um, we have the blues music. We have the Blues Hall of Fame in St. Louis, like the Blues Museum, right?
Yeah,
So
and there is a heavy metal Hall of Fame.
really,
There
there's a,
is,
oh wow,
and this year, Bruce Kulick and Eric Carr from Kiss got inducted, and it was super cool. Um, so yeah,
I
I
did
mean,
not know that. Okay,
it's kind of underground,
it's still cool. No, it's cool. It's cool though. I mean,
right?
I mean, you can have both. It's fine. You can do the genreification later,
Yeah,
but it's
right.
and the thing is too is in a time when people are divisive, putting music into subcategories. Why you can like Tina Turner, Hart, and LL Cool J at the same time.
Yep,
It's all do it.
and I do.
You know. So
So let's run down really, really quickly. This year's inductees, the performer category includes Tina Turner, Carole King, the Go-Go's, Jay-Z, the Foo Fighters, and Todd Rundgren. The early influence awards are going to Kraftwerk, Charlie Patton, and Gil Scott Heron. Musical excellence awards are going to LL Cool J, Billy Preston, and Randy Rhodes. And the Ahmet Ertegun Award is going to Clarence Avant. And I think this is a really good and a really strong class of a really good group of people.
more so than in years past, yes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, for me, Billy Preston going in is long overdue.
Hmm.
And so is Gil Scott Heron going in is
Dude.
amazing. It's also a statement. I mean, it's not necessarily
Yeah.
it's not as weird as like putting Sun Ra in, right? But it's kind of like you're putting someone that's not as well
Mhm.
entrenched in popular music, but his
Right.
music has been hugely
Oh, yeah.
culturally important, right?
Yeah.
So I love the fact that, and Kraftwerk should be going in,
Mhm.
because this opens an interesting door now for electronic artists. But
Right.
also, people don't realize that Kraftwerk also opened the door for rock, some of the prog stuff, and some of the rock stuff down the road later. So they kind of fit in this multi
Mhm.
camp. So I'm totally great with that. And the Go Go's, what
Yeah.
took so long?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Um, so talking about Gil Scott Heron, I was pretty much I knew the name, and I was pretty much wholly unaware of him until about 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, when I was working at Barnes and Noble. I was the manager of the music and DVD department, and I had a regular customer named Mr. Pharaoh Smith, who was an old blues cat from the St. Louis area. He saw all the greats, and he gave me a schooling about Gil Scott Heron. And so I started to really kind of like, listen to him, and he is phenomenal. So we've got a list of the people who are appearing at the awards show, McCartney and Taylor Swift. And we know what most of them are doing. Like, we know Angela Bassett is going to be inducting Tina Turner because she played Tina Turner in a movie. um, McCartney is doing the Foo Fighters because they're buddies and they've collaborated a lot. Taylor Swift is going to be doing a tribute to Carole King, but there's some that we don't know about. And one of the performers is going to be her. And it's not been said yet what it is that she's doing, but I will guarantee you that she is going to be doing a tribute to Gil Scott Heron because she is incredibly like socially conscious minded, and I just feel like she and Gil Scott Heron just completely resonate, like
Hmm.
same string. So I would guarantee you. I was thinking maybe she would be also doing, like, if Jay-Z performs, she might be doing the Alicia Keys part in Empire State of Mind. But regardless of whether she does that, I'll bet you that she is there to do tribute to Gil Scott Heron.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you're looking forward to?
So, being from St. Louis, the birthplace of Tina Turner, and having her so ingrained in the musical culture of our city,
Yeah.
um, I'm really happy for her, especially having
Yeah.
met Ike. I worked at a record store, and we had an in-store with Ike Turner.
Wow.
And I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to have that conversation here, but I will tell
That's
you about it
perfectly
later.
fine.
Um, but what she endured as an artist to stand on her own, within her own musical world, and
Yeah.
then also making music as an African American woman at that time, is pretty important.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a documentary on her that I think is on Showtime. I think
I think so,
that
yeah.
came, that I want. It's one of the pandemic things I watched, and it's amazing. Right?
Right, right.
Um, she had a comeback late in life
Mhm.
in the 80s at a time when people her age did not have comebacks,
Yeah.
right? And the voice is just, it's a lot of different things in that voice. It's pretty
Mhm.
incredible, right? So I'm really happy for Tina Turner. Uh,
Absolutely.
I'm amazingly happy for Kraftwerk.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, I'm so excited about that.
it's because Kraftwerk's always been this, like, God, these guys are weird. Who are they? Like,
Yeah.
we just think of Cars, Cars and Steel, right? But everything from like Stereolab to Nine Inch Nails to Moby to, like, you know
Yeah.
Vangelis is somehow
Yeah.
connected to Kraftwerk, and
Right.
it's nice to recognize an artist that's not necessarily American or
Right.
English speaking, right?
Right, right,
Um,
right.
the Go Go's, the Go Go's tick off all the boxes right away,
Mhm.
and they should have been in a long time ago. Todd Rundgren probably should have been in a long time ago.
Well, that is absolutely true, and, he's said for months now that he's not going to be there, and he's got a tour going right now and has a show that night
Mhm.
somewhere else in the world, wherever. And he has said he is happy for the fans, because the fans have been pushing for his induction for a long time. It is not something that he's interested in at all, but he is happy for his fans that this is happening for them.
Yeah,
So
and
that's interesting.
and the Foo Fighters,
Mm.
Dave Grohl has worked is one of the hardest
Yeah.
working. Every time I turn around, that guy's doing something, right?
Right.
Um, I think of him kind of as a very blue collar working man's musician
Hmm.
who, and the fact that they're doing a Bee Gees cover album shows he doesn't take himself
Right.
too,
Exactly.
too seriously.
I love it.
And the thing that I find really interesting about the Foo Fighters, I mean, I primarily love the first two records. I can listen to
Hmm.
them, but that first record's really great, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He had a lot, and it's really hard if you're him to step out of that giant shadow of Nirvana.
Right.
I mean, which now seems like you kind of forget that he's
You
associated
can.
with it.
Right.
But at the
Exactly. He's
time,
so ingrained. Yeah.
that was a big deal stepping out of that shadow.
Sure.
And you know, there's something to be said about like really hard working musicians getting in that have paid their dues.
Right.
And the thing that surprised me about the Foo Fighters is I did not realize they've been around as long as they were.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, oh yeah, we're at the top. Look at that. Look at the time. In the same way Nine Inch Nails were. Like wait a minute, what they've been on this. And Billy Preston, man. Oh my God. Billy Preston made so many really great records that you've heard but don't realize you've heard.
Yep.
And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And played on things that other artists did that you might not realize. I mean, it's pretty famously played with the Beatles. And I honestly don't remember if it was Paul or John, but one of them wanted him to be the fifth Beatle. They wanted to invite him into the band.
I thought it was John and George.
Maybe it was.
I know George Harrison loved. Yeah. And that will be in the upcoming Beatles documentary, I bet, because I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think he opened for the Beatles a couple times too.
I'm sure.
I could be wrong. I'm not of that age, but like Billy Preston is one of those people that like if you go to a pub in England and you're like, oh, you're an American listening, like, oh, do you love Billy Preston? That if you could say that, then that he's more widely appreciated overseas than he is here by the average music person.
Yeah,
and it's so good to see him get his due.
Right. It's just, I mean, it's a shame that it didn't happen while he was alive.
Yeah.
And I super appreciate being the old heavy metal guy that I am. I super appreciate Randy Rhodes getting this attention.
Even I do. Randy Rever. Okay, so Billy Preston and Glenn Campbell have probably collectively played on every great record made in the history of American pop music, right? But Randy Rhodes, that dude, and I remember hearing about Randy Rhodes when I first discovered him through MTV, right? And I was watching Headbangers Ball, and they were listing all the records that he played on when they did an interview with him.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just like, man, this guy could play. And you can hear the thing I love about him, and it might just be me. I'm not a metal guy like as much as you and Anthony are, but I can hear him in a record and know he's on it. And I'm not even a metal guy. And I think and I know that sounds kind of weird and crass, but I think that's a really great testament, is if the casual person could recognize, oh, that's Randy Rhodes, right?
Yeah.
In the same way they're like, oh, that's Van Halen, right? There would not be an Eddie Van Halen if there was not a Randy Rhodes. There might be.
Other way around.
Other way around, yeah.
Other way around.
Yeah. That's kind of really? Okay, never mind. But he's been on like so many great records. And I think too that how do I put this? It's my understanding. If I'm wrong with this, Alan, you can correct me. It's my understanding that a lot more hard rock and metal acts aren't getting into the Hall of Fame. That's a perception by me.
No, that is absolutely correct.
I mean, I don't understand why there's a stigma to it. I mean, I understand why you put some of them in and some of them you don't. I get it. You don't put Warrant in. I get it, but
sure.
Surely you got some room for Kicks or but like did Maiden finally get in? I can't remember. Or Priest,
So basically, even if you get nominated on the long list, if you don't get enough votes to make it to the short list, then you might get nominated another time. And if you don't make the short list that time, then you're probably not going to ever get
Yeah.
nominated again. And
I
so that's what
yeah,
happens to a lot of these people, is that
and I kind of
sometimes they get inducted at the same time as each other, and it kind of divides the vote, and it's ridiculous.
thought that too. Once you got on the list, that meant you were on. You might not get in this year, but you have to kind of like Kraftwerk's been waiting for a while.
Yeah,
It's kind of like okay, it's going to happen. But like
right.
I just don't remember doing this every year. Going, I have friends that I respect their musical taste
Yeah.
that will argue till their dying breath to get like this guy and this guy in,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I have to listen to them as somebody who listens to say why isn't this person in?
Right.
And I think this is going to change. I mean, I think that the one nice thing about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the last couple of years is I think that the attitudes towards it are changing in terms of what is popular music versus what is art. And I hope I'm not wrong, but the fact the Go-Go's are in after just waiting and waiting
Hmm.
and waiting um, gives me some hope. I mean, you put Nine Inch Nails in for God's sakes. Why can't you put? Why is Nine Inch? I love Nine Inch Nails, but why isn't Nine Inch Nails going in? Why did they go in before Iron Maiden? Why?
Yeah.
Or
Who knows?
or Priest?
Well, I mean, what's funny, I mean, Hart was available for it for like a decade before they actually got nominated, which is insane because they were so influential on so many artists. And
Yeah,
if I remember rightly, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts went in a year before Hart did. And
which I
that
thought
is insane.
that is weird too.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to mention really quickly also Clarence Avant. That is somebody that I was not familiar with. And he has been he's kind of considered the godfather of black music. He has been a label owner, a manager, concert organizer, event producer, fundraiser. He's done all this stuff, and he founded Avant-Garde Broadcasting, which was one of the first black-owned radio stations in the
Yeah,
country, and that's phenomenal. So
yeah.
I'm excited to learn more about him.
He pretty much decided, okay, blacks aren't getting played on the radio. We don't have them. We don't have our own mechanisms. We don't have our own access. We're going to make it.
Yeah,
He basically took everything that happened with Motown and Stax and all of the success that they had with that and said, why don't we have a bigger piece of the pie?
yeah,
Why don't
yeah.
we have a bigger say? And, you know, radio, he kind of helped start sort of this segmentation of radio, right?
Hmm.
Like this is a soul station, this is an R&B station, this is a hip hop station or a rock station. We didn't really have that. I mean, there was no way that someone like Billy Preston was going to get played on a rock and roll station until that guy came along, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, when I was, growing up, I was listening to top 40 radio in the I was kind of young in the mid 70s. I think I started to really get serious about what was on the radio around 74ish. And I remember, Will It Go Round in Circles was a big hit. Nothing from Nothing, which I still love to this day. So, I remember Billy from my growing up years, he was part of the
yeah,
sound of what I was hearing when I was just a kid. And I remember years and years later realizing that he was the guy who played on some of the later Beatles songs.
mhm.
And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I'm really looking forward to the Go-Go's. I'm actually looking forward to. I'm sure Jay-Z is going to perform, and I'm looking forward to that. And I really hope that LL Cool J is going to perform as well.
I've seen LL Cool J live. It's pretty
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
But I really hope that there's going to be a Kraftwerk performance, just because I want to see all those people. Like I want to see them perform like Space Lab or something like that, and just watch that audience's faces just glaze over. Like, what the hell is this?
I think they're going to do what they've been doing with like the holograms and the robots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Probably.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That would be amazing. I would love to see that.
One of the pandemic things that sucked the most is I had tickets to Kraftwerk
Oh,
last year,
yeah,
and I was like, I get so excited about very few things. I was excited about seeing Kraftwerk as I was like, "Ooh, there's a new Doctor Who." It's like that level
right.
of excitement, right? Or like you know when you like just hear a song, right? I was just really really excited about that, and it didn't happen, and I'm really frustrated. But I'm glad that
Yeah.
they're doing this.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Me too. So the induction ceremony is next Saturday, October 30th. It can be seen. They're going to stream it live on their YouTube page. And where else are they streaming it? I forget. But check their YouTube channel because that's where it's going to
Yeah.
be uninterrupted.
Or check their
Uh,
social media. I'm sure they'll have it tagged
yeah,
there
yeah, yeah.
too.
And then it'll be in an edited format. They will present it on HBO Max later. They haven't set a date for that yet, but a little bit later on, it'll be available on HBO Max. So I really want us to do a sort of like a wrap up show about the after the fact, whether that be after next Saturday or after it debuts on HBO Max.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about this again after we've seen the thing.
And it's also too outside of the Grammys.
Yeah.
One of the few times you get to see cross pollination of artists, where like
Right.
this guy might perform with this guy or this guy, and you don't really
Right.
know, and that's really cool. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like one of the things that I'm looking forward to is that Bryan Adams is one of the performers, and he and Tina Turner did 2 songs together and that are really great. And I hope that I don't know if she's performing or not, but I hope that he and somebody do those songs. So
mhm.
anyway, um, another topic that we want to do tonight because you brought this one up. Why don't you give a little introduction to what we're going to be talking about for the next 20-ish minutes?
Yeah. So I've seen Dune, and then last week I went and saw Last Night in Soho.
Oh,
Right.
cool. Cool.
And between both of those, it got me kind of thinking of soundtracks. Like
Yep.
we know Edgar Wright, the way he uses music in his films, right?
Yep.
I think it's a little more nuanced and finesse than Tarantino. I think it's like, oh, I'm cool. I got this song, and I think it's much more finessed, right?
Hmm.
But Last Night in Soho uses all this great 60s London stuff, right? There's more Dusty Springfield and Petula Clark than you can like scream at, but there's the Kinks, right? There's
Yeah.
like all this stuff from that era, right? And it's all embedded in the foundation of the film. When you
Hmm.
see Dune, right? The Hans Zimmer score, while completely different in every single way, that it is embedded into the foundation of the film. And it got me sort of thinking about, soundtracks are different now than they were. I grew
Hmm.
up in the 80s when you had like Fast Times at Ridgemont High soundtrack or Pretty in Pink soundtrack or Breakfast Club sound, and now, much more so than ever, the placement of songs and how they structure this is really interesting. I thought Last Night in Soho used songs in a way that was sort of similar to how Lynch placed songs in Twin Peaks.
Hmm.
And I just think that type of soundtracking, for lack of a
Hmm.
better word, it's not really around. And I think that, yeah, a lot of filmmakers will hire a guy to do their sound. Like I remember that film An Education that came out a couple years ago,
Yeah.
and the way it perfectly used French pop music, right? There's just something really cool about when you hear songs that fit a movie perfectly, like an Amelie when they use some of the different songs in that too, right?
Oh, yeah. That was
Um,
phenomenal.
but at the same time, you've got the Hans Zimmer scores, like the way the scores sound in Blade Runner, or the way the scores sound in Dune, or
Hmm.
Jaws. It's really interesting to sort of. I just been thinking a lot about this lately, and it was just kind of the reason I brought it up. But the way these things frame movies, I think, is
Hmm.
almost as central to films now
Hmm.
as the cinematography.
You know, when you're talking about television, also shows like Stranger Things have
Yeah,
used music in incredibly effective ways. To really anchor the audience in a time frame. To
yeah.
really get your mind back into the time that the show is set. And there's a movie
Cobra
that
Kai, the same thing.
right, right.
I mean,
There's a movie that did that same thing in incredibly well. And it's a surprising you would not think of, but it was Cruella. And
yes, it did.
Cruella takes place over like a couple of decades, and they use the music to tell you exactly where you are in the timeline. Like they use One Way or Another by Blondie in the 80s part, and a Clash song, and Stone Cold Crazy by Queen. And it's really interesting the way that the music ties into the time that the story is telling at that moment. It's really cool.
Yeah, and they all use Bowie. I
Yeah,
think
well.
he's in every soundtrack I've ever. But anyway, yeah, and I just think going back to like The Crow, right, and how The Crow even used music, right? It just got me really sort of thinking back about a lot of this, and I'd forgotten about Stranger Things, but like all these artists in the hair metal bands in the 80s and 90s are thanking their lucky stars for Cobra Kai, right?
Right.
And it's making you reevaluate all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And in the same way that Spike Lee used music in his films, it's like I think I thought Baby Driver was one of the best uses of music.
Oh yeah,
that I'd
man, I
seen
love that movie.
Yeah, I love it too. Yeah. Yeah, you were. I don't think you were around that year, right? I was determined when I was in Atlanta to go to all the Baby Driver sites. I don't think I subjected you to that.
I don't think you did.
God bless those people. But this does as good a job or different. And like I love Petula Clark and I love Dusty Springfield, but I don't think of them in soundtrack. I mean, yeah, everybody's used "Son of a Preacher Man" all the time. It fits, right? I get it, but
Right,
just
sure.
you don't think of it being used that kind of way, right? And then I'm starting to think about this, and then I recently rewatched King Kong, and I'm like, damn it, Max Steiner, you're doing the same thing that Hans Zimmer's doing. I thought this was kind of a new thing, but it's like, no, it's an old thing that they're bringing back, that they're really doing well, and they got away from it. And I just think that's really cool.
And I think I remember the first soundtrack that I ever owned, and it was that's actually not true, but the first one that I think really shaped my awareness of music use in a movie was the original Star Wars soundtrack.
Yeah.
1977. And I remember having that and just playing it at home over and over. And that's when I started to notice things like a theme for a particular character that's used in a different way in different scenes, to kind of like reflect the mood of that character or the situation that character is in. And I was still kind of young back in 77. So that was a new experience for me.
Yeah. I mean, for me, Star Wars was the exact same thing. It's like, what is this? It was so different. And then oddly enough, the same year you get Star Wars, you get Saturday Night Fever, which also frames in a completely different, and then Raiders of the Lost Ark did that for me too.
Okay.
And then one of my favorites, still, I think what may well be my favorite soundtrack in the entire world is still the Morricone score for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, for the whole film, not just because there's some really interesting orchestral pieces, and there's some interesting the way that he brings in the horns and stuff. But it's really interesting how the history of film and the history of film soundtracks is paralleled. But thinking of like of Dune, you got a movie that if you haven't read the book, you might get a little lost, or if you turn away for a second, you might get lost. The way that you stay involved in that movie is the score, which I think is really interesting. And I think Last Night in Soho, you've got these, they basically redid these swinging 60s London clubs, right?
Right.
And you're just waiting. Where's Michael York? I'm waiting for Michael York to walk by, or where's Michael Caine? You just expect it. And I love the Kinks, but I never hear them enough in a movie, So that's really, really cool to have some of that. And it just got me thinking about soundtracks. That, and I've been listening to a couple things. The Twin Peaks soundtrack has been in my head for a couple of months now, in the pandemic. I'm not really sure why, but that whole thing is just amazing.
Oh my gosh.
And
Lynch and his use of music is so incredibly evocative and so bizarre.
And I think Edgar Wright is kind of similar to Lynch it's just as evocative, but it's not as far out in many ways.
Mhm.
Um, but certain filmmakers tie movies in to their sounds,
Mhm.
which I love.
Right. I haven't seen Dune yet, and I have no idea when the hell I'm gonna get to see it, um, because I am busy every night this week and have a convention next weekend, and my band is performing next weekend. And next weekend is also when the Eternals comes out, so I don't know when the hell I'm gonna get to see that either.
Yeah.
I mean, I could watch Dune right now on HBO Max, but I do not want to do that. I want to have my first experience with the new Dune on the big screen, in a big room, in a big sound system. So, I don't know when it's gonna be.
It'll happen.
It'll happen. Okay, so one of my other favorite soundtracks, since you're talking about, you mentioned the '80s earlier, and I
Mhm.
used it as because I didn't know what direction you were going to go with this, because I couldn't
I
remember
didn't
what.
either.
So I just picked a movie that I absolutely love the soundtrack, and it was Heavy Metal from 1980, 80 or 81. I don't remember. It had to be. It was one or the other, and it was mostly new songs that pop and rock bands recorded for the thing. Um, and then most of those bands use those songs later on their next album or whatever. But man, I love that soundtrack. I love that whole movie. I love the varying. It's sort of an anthology presentation, and I love the varying animation styles, and I love the way that the movie was tied into each scene. And it's still one of my favorite soundtracks ever.
Yeah, I saw. Oddly enough, I saw Heavy Metal right after I saw Fantasia, and like 2 nights in a row,
Oh
and
wow,
the way that they each used film to set up
yeah.
things is kind of interesting.
I didn't even think about including the Fantasia movies. Holy smokes, I love those movies so much.
Yeah,
And being a big classical fan that I am, I loved seeing these classical pieces with a animation setting that you wouldn't naturally expect.
yeah,
You know, hip cartoon hippos and crocodiles dancing with each other is not what you would normally think of.
yeah,
Seeing the big Chernobog monster for Nine on Bald Mountain makes perfect sense, but some of the other stuff is so different. You know, Mickey and the Sorcerer's Apprentice is
yeah.
iconic.
And it's great that symphonies now. Part of it is to get people into classical music, but they're playing live
Yes,
soundtracks.
yes, I love it.
You
The
know.
one that I didn't get to go see, and it was a few months ago, was Atlanta Symphony Orchestra was doing Black Panther. Oh my God,
Yeah,
what an incredible score that is! And it's super percussion heavy, of course. And I would love to have seen that live.
yeah,
With the movie playing, and we've seen a couple of them. We've gone to see a couple of the Harry Potters, where they perform the score as the movie plays, and that's so much fun.
yeah.
But I would love to have seen Black Panther.
Yeah, they're
God, that
doing
would have been
they're
amazing.
doing Jedi here. I've
Yeah.
seen Raiders. The one I really am upset that I missed was Close Encounters,
Oh yeah.
because I want to see how they make it kind of all work. You know,
Yep. Hmm.
um, but that's okay. It'll. But I just think it's really interesting, that correlation between sound and vision. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So you've brought Bowie up a couple of times. Back to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I kind of wish Kraftwerk had gone in at a time that Bowie was still around and could have inducted them,
Yeah.
since they were so influential on his late '70s sound, his Berlin albums. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. Those Berlin records, you can hear the craft work in that.
Oh yeah.
The other thing, you can hear, you can kind of even hear them in U2. Some of the U2 records. I know it
Mm,
sounds weird. They should have, if they can't get Bowie introduced them now, they should get Brian Eno.
true. Absolutely. That would be perfect. So
Kids,
I
ask
don't
your
know.
parents.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So we are coming up on an hour. Is there any last thing that you want to get in before we call it a night?
No, I just love the fact that someone else looks at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the excitement that other people do when they get the Oscars. I mean, I get excited
Yeah.
about the Oscars and the Tonys and but I also get I'm at the point now where I'm getting excited about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I haven't been in the past. Because in the past, I would say 10 years ago, they'd say Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I would end up mad about somebody getting in or not getting in. And now I'm kind of like, okay, this is cool. This guy's getting in and this guy's getting in. You know, I would love Keith Richards to induct Billy Preston, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. It would also be cool if McCartney was doing that.
He very well. I mean, McCartney can pretty much be going from table to table on these. You know,
right? That's
except
true.
the Go-Go's. He probably couldn't introduce the Go-Go's.
But what's her name is doing that? E.T. Firestarter. Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
There's a Kathy Valentine on Twitter posted a photo of the Go-Go's back in the 80s with Drew Barrymore when she was 8 years old. Drew has been around that band and has been a supporter and a fan of that band since the beginning, since she was a kid. So she's the one that's going to be inducting the Go-Go's, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool too.
Anyway, so where can folks find you around the internet?
So you can find me Wednesdays. I do a radio show on KDHX. It's right there. It's streaming from 7 to 9 Central Time. And it's also archives. You can listen to it later. It's called Juxtaposition. And you can listen to that whenever you want. Also, I do some podcasting and some writing for needcoffee.com and a couple other sites and stuff too, as well. And but those are the two biggies.
Yeah. So other than this right here, I have my little publishing company right there.
Yeah.
Cosmicpress.com. And we've got a number of Doctor Who books out, some classics republished, and a couple of books by other artists, other authors. And tomorrow, our first novel is being released, The Mad King by Rebecca Mabry.
I love the hardback on that. That looks cool.
Yeah. This is our first hardcover edition.
That looks really cool.
The Mad King is the first book that we have out in 3 formats: hardcover, paperback, and ebook. So I'm excited about it. It's a great book. I've thoroughly enjoyed the read. It's a wonderful book. So that is available from Amazon. You can check more information out about it at cosmicpress.com. Rob, thank you so much for hanging out tonight and talking about, one of my favorite topics, music.
I could talk about music till the sun goes down, and it's nice to do it.
And I know that you have some serious weather moving in.
Yeah, not yet.
About an hour. So I hope everything goes okay. I hope
got the flashlights, got the extra water, got
excellent.
Charging everything that could possibly be getting charged.
Get it charged. Yep, absolutely.
Clear path to the basement.
Yeah. All right. So I hope everything stays safe tonight, and I will see you next Sunday night. And everybody out there in Facebook land and YouTube land, thanks for hanging out. And we will see you around the internets. And we'll see you next Sunday. Actually, no, next Sunday night is Halloween. We won't see you next Sunday night.
To be determined.
Maybe we'll try and pre-record something.
Yeah, to be determined.
I don't know.
You'll see us. We'll tell you.
Anyway, so take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Everybody, take